First tonight, political parties in Britain are making their final appeals to voters on the last day of campaigning in the general election. The opposition Labour Party, led by Keir Starmer, has remained far ahead in opinion polls during 6 weeks of campaigning. It's led the Conservatives to wheel out their big guns. At a rally in London, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson made an 11th hour entrance to the campaign trail, telling voters to back the Conservatives, claiming that Labour would use a sledgehammer majority to destroy much of what the Conservatives had achieved, a message that the current embattled Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has continued to push on the campaign trail today. Meanwhile, Labour's Keir Starmer has urged voters not to forget what he calls the Tory legacy of economic chaos, and one rule for them, another for everyone else.
We've been absolutely campaigning with a smile on our face, a spring in our step, because we've got a confident message about change to take forward and to be absolutely clear about the choice at this election. We've now had 14 years of chaos, of division and failure, and the choice tomorrow is to bring that to an end, to turn the page and start to rebuild with Labour. We do have to say, imagine waking up on Friday morning and the headline is 5 more years of the Tories. Nothing's changed. They'll be emboldened, entitled, thinking they can get away with anything. So we have to make that case. We have to say over and over again, change only happens if you vote for it. Change only happens if you vote for it.
Well, we were hoping to hear from the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as well as the former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but sadly those clips are not ready yet. But more on the British election in a moment. Across the pond, though, in the US, President Biden has blamed exhaustion caused by a heavy travel schedule for his faltering performance in last week's televised debate with Donald Trump. The 81-year-old said relentless international travel had greatly weakened him, and he told donors that he almost fell asleep on stage. White House officials had blamed his halting performance on a cold. There's been increasing concern in the Democratic Party about Mr. Biden's mental fitness ahead of November's presidential election. Excuse me. On Tuesday, the Texas Congressman Lloyd Doggett became the first sitting Democratic politician to call on the president to leave the race, something Mr. Biden and his family maintain that he will not be pressured to do.
And first of all, I want to say we understand the concerns. We get it. The president did not have a great night, as you all know, and many of you reached out during the debate. The president had a cold. He had a hoarse voice. You all heard it. That's why you reached out. But I will say this, and the president said this over the past couple of days, certainly right after the debate. He knows how to do the job. And he knows how to do the job, not because he says it, because his record proves it. Joe Biden is a person. Take away his title. He is someone who has dealt with tragedy. He is someone who has confronted that head on. He is someone who knows how to get back up once you've been knocked down. That is something that he understands very, very well. And I think, and we believe, that's something that many of Americans across the country understand as well. We understand. We're not taking away from what you all saw or what the American people saw. We understand. It was a bad night. It is not uncommon for incumbents to have a bad night on their first debate.
Well, it's a little difficult to believe, and it seems to be the latest story, blaming the moderators, blaming the staff, blaming the cold. I don't know. What I do know is that we're at serious risk of our government being taken over by a criminal and his gang. The democracy values that we cherish so much being lost to an authoritarian strongman. It was very tough. In retrospect, I wish I had said it earlier, because I think this needed to be a decision that was made much earlier in the process. But the debate and the ruling by the Supreme Court, and then the input from my neighbors here in Texas, was so strong from my own family that I felt that that I needed to speak out, and being an older member of Congress, not about to start a new career and worrying about that, or being a particularly vulnerable member of Congress, it seemed to me that I had the ability to do that perhaps some of my colleagues who have exactly the same views, that I might speak even if they couldn't come in a public way. I hope some of them will be calling the White House and voicing their private concerns if they can't join me publicly.
Well, for more on both these stories, let's cross live to London and speak with our special correspondent, John Cookson. Good to see you, John. Before we talk about the American situation, let's look at the election where you are. It's the eve of what's been described as a big moment. I wonder how big a moment it is for Britain. We've heard the words seismic and political earthquake being liberally used to describe what is likely to happen.
Let's call it pivotal, Charles. Yes, good evening from Downing Street, where here in the UK, polls open in just under 13 hours from now at 7 in the morning. And if the opinion polls are to be believed, Labour's set for an absolute landslide win. Interestingly, tonight, after the Sunday Times, the big heavyweight newspaper owned by Rupert Murdoch, backed Labour on Sunday. Now tonight, The Sun, arguably one of the biggest selling tabloid newspapers in the UK, is backing Labour. And you'll remember, Charles, and you and I are old enough to remember back in 1992 when The Sun famously backed John Major instead of Neil Kinnock, and then afterwards said, "It's The Sun what won it." Look, these newspapers aren't as powerful as they were or influential as they were back in the day, Charles, but certainly if the Sun newspaper comes out and backs Keir Starmer, then it looks like pretty much curtains for the incumbent of number 10, Rishi Sunak, who's been in the job less than 2 years. Opinion polls tonight, just out of interest, put Labour on 41%, the Conservatives on 21%, so Conservative trailing by at least 20 points there, and that's been pretty steady over the weeks. Reform increasing its score to 16%, Liberal Democrats on 11%, and the Greens on 6%. More than 40,000 people registered to vote, 46 million people registered to vote. More than 7 million have already voted, Charles, by post, although there was some controversy around this morning about missing ballot papers and not arriving in time. So it looks very much as if Keir Starmer is to be the new Prime Minister of the UK. And Rishi Sunak, out of a job, he'll no doubt resign early on Friday morning. We're expecting the poll to be released at 10 o'clock tomorrow night. That's the exit poll, and we'll get a fair idea, because these exit polls are pretty accurate on who's won the night. But at the moment, it looks very much like Keir Starmer's night.
But I mean, John, it is a bit unusual though, isn't it? Because this predicted earthquake is not caused by any political fault lines. I mean, there are no radical policy differences between Labour and the Conservatives, are there? And with that in mind, give us a glimpse of what's on voters' minds on the eve of Britain's big electoral moment.
You're absolutely right, Charles. As always, this has been a boring, frankly boring campaign, because there's not much between the two major parties, Labour and Conservatives. The mood, I think, is this, that people see that Britain is, in quotes, broken. Nothing works. You can't get a hospital appointment. There's 7.5 million people on the waiting list. People are pulling their own teeth out because they can't get a dentist appointment. Immigration seems to be out of control, with these boats arriving every day from France. nothing works. And Keir Starmer has been emphasising the fact that if people want change, and the people in the UK are desperate for change after 14 years of Tory rule, then the Labour Party is the one that they should vote for. Sunak, on the other hand, campaigning today, and I noted that you didn't manage to get the Boris Johnson clip out, but basically they're both saying and warning that majorities of hundreds of the Labour Party in Parliament is bad for the country, and that arguably that's correct. You need a strong opposition to have effective government. So this Starmageddon that people have been talking about, if it transpires, if there is a massive majority of, say, 200 seats to Labour, that isn't good for the UK. But the difference between the two parties is cigarette paper thin, but people just want change, and Keir Starmer offers what people desire, if you go by the opinion polls. Charles.
So just briefly, John, I was listening very avidly to your analysis there, which is always interesting. So beyond things like immigration, the economy, public services like the NHS that you were talking about, is it your sense that this is an election that is going to be played out on people's feelings that they need to give another party a chance to make them feel better off, as well as, of course, that great force of political gravity that you hinted at, that the Conservatives have been in power for 14 years?
It does boil down to that. I think it's just people just want change, as I said before. I mean, there are concerns about Labour putting up taxes, although Keir Starmer has assured the country that three of the main taxes, national insurance and VAT and income tax, will not increase. But there are many other ways that the Labour Party can increase taxes, for example, in capital gains tax, and people are worried about that. Also, there's a question about whether Labour has enough in the kitty to carry out some of the changes that they want to do. Keir Starmer making great play of the fact that he wants economic growth, but economic growth in the UK has been slow for a decade now, no more than 4%.
You're watching an abridged version of Arise News Hour. Plenty more to come. Stay with us. Welcome back to an abridged version of Arise News Hour. I'm Charles Aniagolu in Abuja, and of course Arise special correspondent John Cookson is in London. He's back with me. John, apologies for that loss in communication with you. Technical gremlins, as you well know. You've been in this business long enough, and of course you were telling us about the British elections, and we were just getting ready to hop across the pond to the United States, a country that you're very familiar with, you've covered extensively. About 2 hours ago or so, the New York Times reported that President Biden has told an ally that he's weighing whether to continue in the race, which, if confirmed, would be a pretty big story. But then the White House has come out swiftly to say that this is false and the president is in the race to win it. What is your reaction to all of that?
Yeah, Charles, I saw that the New York Times, of course, called earlier this week for Biden to step down. But as you say, the White House strongly denying the story, and that source, the so-called ally, is not named by the newspaper. But you know, the old grey lady, as it's known, doesn't often get things wrong. There's a lot happening in DC tonight and in political circles, Charles. At this hour, Jeff Zients, who's the White House Chief of Staff, is having a meeting with staffers at the White House. His message to them tonight, Charles, is hold the line, weather the storm, and keep your heads down. Because there is so much speculation swirling around as to what Biden will do, and my own view is that we'll probably see Biden stepping down in the next 48 hours or so, maybe on Friday. It depends how He's got a couple of events coming up in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and for sure he'll be on autocue then, but may well take reporters' questions, and any gaffe in that, you know, must be taken very seriously as to whether he actually continues. There's also an important ABC pre-recorded interview with George Stephanopoulos on Friday. It goes out on Friday. I'm not sure what time it's when it's recorded, but that has to go well for Biden. If it doesn't, then you know, he's toast. And also, there's one view that the two factors come into play here. Whether the people who financially back the Democrats are still in support of Joe Biden, and what are the opinion polls saying about Joe Biden? Do they want him to go? Certainly in an Ipsos poll tonight, 56% of voters say that they want him to step down, and that's in line with other polls that have been taken since that disastrous TV debate last week. So big question mark over Joe Biden's campaign, whether he'll continue or not. Pulling out would be an amazing thing to do, so close to the general election in November. This has only happened once before, and that was with Lyndon Johnson. He pulled out 8 months before, back in the 1970s, due to protests about the government's conduct in Vietnam. So whether we'll see Biden stepping down at this point is unclear at the moment, and of course it raises the big question, Charles, who will replace him? Now, that same Ipsos poll I was talking about mentioned the name Michelle Obama, and I mentioned her name to you last week, Charles, as a possible successor. Certainly she has the potential for beating Trump, and isn't that the most important thing for the Democrats? Michelle Obama said in the past that she's not interested, but that will be quite a thing for the first black woman president of the United States. So the story is very dynamic, it's moving all the time. Matters will happen overnight. I think Biden's meeting with Democrat governors at 11 p.m. UK and Nigeria time, when there'll be a full and frank discussion between him and his Democrat governors. Charles.
And just to pick up on that last line that you just gave us, John, the fact that Joe Biden is meeting Democratic governors later tonight. We also heard that as this story was coming up, the White House denying it and so on, Mr. Biden has also been speaking to a steady stream of senior Democrats. So without making you sort of repeat yourself, I mean, how significant is all that amid all these concerns?
Look, there's so much noise going on at the moment, and certainly in the media in the US, the usual cheerleaders for the Democrats, CNN and MSNBC, are talking incessantly about this for hour after hour. With the general pitch of what they're saying is that, you know, when is Biden going to go, which is quite something, for example, for CNN to do. I don't think he can survive this onslaught for much longer, and come Friday I think he may well have stepped down. It will be an appropriate time, would it not, for him to say, look, I've been in the business, I've served the country for more than 50 years. I realise now that perhaps my mental state is not quite as it should be. Thank you, America, and good night. But of course, that raises the big question again: who will come in his place? Gavin Newsom, perhaps, the governor of California. And again, I mentioned Michelle Obama, the only person in the running who could beat Trump. But she's saying nothing tonight, and has repeatedly said she wasn't interested in the job. Charles.
John, thank you very much indeed. Sterling coverage as always, and if anything breaks that you hear of, do let us know. John Cookson, our special correspondent, talking to me there from outside Downing Street in the heart of London.